The rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor was the only sound in the sterile hospital room as I held Hannah's small hand in mine. My beautiful 8-year-old daughter lay there, peaceful, yet unresponsive, while tubes and wires surrounded her like a technological cocoon. The doctors had said the next 48 hours would be critical after her sudden collapse from what they suspected was a rare form of meningitis. I hadn't left her side for 3 days. "I have to go, Grace," Oliver said, adjusting his tie in the reflection of the window. "Mom's 60th birthday is a milestone. The whole family will be there." His voice carried that familiar tone of finality that I'd grown accustomed to over our 12 years of marriage, the one that brooked no argument. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Oliver, your daughter is in a coma. The doctors said—" "They said she'll probably stay like this for at least a few more days," he interrupted, checking his phone. "You're here. The doctors are here. What difference will it make if I'm gone for 2 days? Mom's been planning this celebration for months." My throat tightened as I watched him pack his overnight bag, moving with the deliberate efficiency I once admired. Now it felt like a slap in the face. "Please," I whispered. "I need you here. Hannah needs you here." He paused for a moment, and I saw something flicker across his face. Doubt, perhaps? But it vanished as quickly as it appeared. "It's just for a couple of days, honey. Hannah won't even know I'm gone. You're overreacting, as usual." He leaned down to kiss my forehead, but I turned away. "I'll be back before you know it." The door clicked shut behind him, and I was left alone with the beeping monitors and my unconscious daughter. I stroked Hannah's pale cheek, remembering how just last week she'd been twirling in the backyard, her brown curls catching the sunlight as she showed me her new dance routine. How quickly everything had changed. That night, as I dozed in the uncomfortable hospital chair, my phone buzzed with photos from Oliver's mother's party. There he was, smiling broadly, champagne glass in hand, surrounded by relatives. In one picture, his arm was around his cousin Daisy, both of them laughing at some shared joke. I felt sick to my stomach. The next morning, Hannah's condition deteriorated rapidly. Her oxygen levels dropped, and doctors rushed in and out of the room. I called Oliver repeatedly, but each call went straight to voicemail. Text messages remained unread. With trembling hands, I called my sister Aurora, who arrived within an hour, her face etched with concern. "Where's Oliver?" she demanded, taking in my exhausted state and Hannah's critical condition. "At his mother's birthday celebration," I replied, my voice hollow. "He said Hannah wouldn't know he was gone anyway." Aurora's expression hardened, but she said nothing, simply pulling up a chair beside me and taking my free hand in hers. We sat there together as the hours ticked by, watching Hannah's life slip away despite the doctor's best efforts. At 3:47 p.m., my beautiful, vibrant daughter took her last breath. I screamed until my voice gave out, clutching her still warm body while Aurora held me, her own tears falling silently. The doctors spoke words I couldn't process. Forms were signed with shaking hands, and still, Oliver's phone went straight to voicemail. That evening, in a daze of grief and rage, I wrote a letter. Just 4 words: "Don't ever find me." I left it on our bedroom dresser, packed a bag, and went to stay with Aurora. The next day, with the support of my family, we laid Hannah to rest in a small, intimate ceremony. Oliver's absence felt like a physical wound, a betrayal so deep it altered the very foundation of who I thought we were. As I stood by my daughter's grave, watching the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the fresh earth, I made a promise, not just to Hannah, but to myself. This wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of a new one, written on my own terms. I just didn't know yet how many unexpected chapters lay ahead. The weeks after Hannah's funeral passed in a blur of grief and numbness. I stayed in Aurora's guest room, spending countless hours staring at the ceiling, clutching Hannah's favorite stuffed giraffe. My phone remained off, unable to bear the thought of seeing Oliver's name appear on the screen. Aurora told me he'd finally called, dozens of times, after finding my note. She'd answered once, just to tell him I never wanted to speak to him again. "He was drunk," she reported, her voice tight with controlled anger. "Said he didn't think it would happen so fast, that he deserved a chance to explain." She sat on the edge of my bed, running her fingers through my unwashed hair. I told him he'd had his chance. It was when our daughter needed him most. I learned later that Oliver had spent those crucial days not just at his mother's birthday celebration, but on an impromptu gambling spree with his cousins at a nearby casino. While our daughter lay dying, he'd been placing bets and drinking champagne. The knowledge settled in my chest like a stone. My parents urged me to take legal action, but I couldn't bear the thought of seeing him in court. Instead, I channeled my energy into the mundane tasks of dismantling a life, closing joint accounts, redirecting mail, filing for divorce through my lawyer. Each step felt like walking through thick mud, but I kept moving forward, if only because standing still hurt more. Aurora's house became my sanctuary. Her 2 teenage sons, usually caught up in their own world of video games and school drama, showed a gentleness that brought fresh tears to my eyes. They'd leave cups of hot chocolate outside my door, or quietly clean up the kitchen when I'd attempt to cook and end up sitting on the floor, overwhelmed by memories of making pancakes with Hannah. One morning, about 6 weeks after Hannah's death, I found myself actually wanting to shower, to feel clean again. As I stood under the hot water, I remembered something Hannah had said during her last dance recital. She'd forgotten a step, stumbled, but kept going with a smile. "Mommy," she'd told me afterward, "Miss Andrea says when you mess up, you just keep dancing. The show isn't over until you decide it's over." That afternoon, I opened my laptop for the first time since everything happened. Before Hannah's illness, I'd worked as a physical therapist, specializing in pediatric rehabilitation. My inbox was flooded with concerned messages from colleagues and clients' families. One email stood out, from Dr. Rodriguez, my former mentor. "Grace," she wrote, "I don't know if you're reading emails, but when you're ready, there's a place for you at the Children's Rehabilitation Center. We're developing a new program for grief counseling combined with physical therapy for children who've lost siblings. Take all the time you need. The door is always open." I sat there, reading and rereading her words until they blurred through my tears. The thought of working with children again both terrified and called to me. Hannah had loved visiting me at work, proudly telling patients how her mom helped kids dance again. That evening, I joined Aurora's family for dinner for the first time instead of eating alone in my room. As I pushed food around my plate, my nephew Tyler suddenly said, "Aunt Grace, would you help me with my physical therapy exercises? My knee's been hurting since soccer practice." I looked up to find 3 pairs of eyes watching me carefully. Aurora started to shush him, but I found myself nodding. "Yes," I said, my voice rusty from disuse. "I can help with that." It was a small moment, but something shifted. The next morning, I replied to Dr. Rodriguez's email. I couldn't go back to work yet, but maybe I could start with volunteer hours, just a few days a week. Baby steps. As I pressed send, I noticed a wedding photo still set as my laptop's background. Oliver and I beaming at each other, blissfully unaware of how it would all end. With trembling fingers, I changed it to a picture of Hannah dancing in the backyard, her face full of joy and determination. "The show isn't over until you decide it's over," I whispered, touching the screen gently. That night, I discovered a support group for parents who had lost children. The meetings were held at a community center just a few blocks from Aurora's house. I didn't speak during my first meeting, but listening to others share their stories made me feel less alone in my grief. One woman, Maria, had lost her son to leukemia 5 years ago. The way she spoke about learning to live with her loss, about finding purpose again while keeping her son's memory alive, resonated deeply. "Grief doesn't have a timeline," she told me after the meeting, pressing a card with her phone number into my hand. "And it doesn't mean forgetting. It means learning to carry them with you in a different way." As I walked home under the evening sky, I felt something I hadn't experienced since that horrible day at the hospital. A tiny spark of hope. Not happiness, not yet, but a glimmer of possibility that maybe, somehow, I could find a way to keep dancing, just like Hannah had taught me. 3 months after Hannah's death, I started volunteering at the Children's Rehabilitation Center. Dr. Rodriguez eased me in gently, having me assist with administrative tasks at first. But being around children again, hearing their laughter, watching their determination, began to heal something inside me that I thought was permanently broken. There was one patient in particular, a 12-year-old girl named Sophie, who reminded me so much of Hannah it initially took my breath away. She was recovering from a car accident that had claimed her younger sister's life. During her therapy sessions, I'd catch glimpses of the same fierce spirit I'd seen in my daughter. One day, while helping Sophie with her exercises, she suddenly burst into tears. "Everyone keeps telling me to be strong," she sobbed. "But sometimes I just want to scream and break things. Is that wrong?" I sat down beside her on the exercise mat, my heart racing. This was the first time a patient had directly addressed grief with me. "No, Sophie," I said softly. "It's not wrong at all. Sometimes being strong means letting yourself feel everything, even the scary feelings." She looked up at me, her eyes wide. "Did you lose someone too? You understand it different than the others." I nodded, fighting back my own tears. "My daughter, Hannah. She would have loved you. You both have the same favorite color, purple." That session turned into something more than physical therapy. As Sophie worked on her exercises, we talked about grief, about memories, about how some days were harder than others. Dr. Rodriguez observed from the doorway and later called me into her office. "Grace," she said, "I've been watching you with Sophie. Have you considered combining your physical therapy expertise with grief counseling? We've been seeing more cases like Sophie's, children dealing with both physical and emotional trauma. They need someone who truly understands." The suggestion hit me like a thunderbolt. In the support group, I'd recently started sharing my own story, finding strength in helping others navigate their grief. The idea of bringing that same healing approach to my professional work felt right, like pieces of a puzzle finally clicking into place. I enrolled in a grief counseling certification program, attending evening classes while continuing to volunteer during the day. The coursework was challenging, forcing me to confront my own grief in new ways. But each difficult session, each tear-filled assignment, felt like paying tribute to Hannah's memory. Maria from the support group became a close friend during this time. She'd been right about grief not having a timeline. Some days still knocked me flat, like finding Hannah's school art projects in a forgotten folder, or driving past her favorite ice cream shop. But now I had tools to handle these moments, and people who understood. One evening, after a particularly intense therapy session with Sophie, I found myself driving to the cemetery where Hannah was buried. I hadn't been back since the funeral, but something pulled me there. The setting sun painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, Hannah's favorite colors. Sitting by her gravestone, I told her everything. About Sophie, about my studies, about how much I missed her every single day. "I'm trying to make something meaningful from this pain, sweetheart," I whispered. "I hope you'd be proud." A gentle breeze rustled the flowers I'd brought, and for the first time, I felt a sense of peace in this place. The crushing weight of grief was still there, but it had shifted, transformed into something that could perhaps help others. As I was leaving the cemetery, my phone buzzed with a text from Aurora. She'd been tidying up her garage and found a box of Hannah's dance recital videos. "Do you want to watch them together?" she asked. "Only if you're ready." A few months ago, this would have sent me spiraling. Now, though it brought tears to my eyes, I felt something else too, a desire to celebrate the joy Hannah had brought to our lives. "Yes," I replied. "I'd like that." That night, Aurora and I sat together on her couch, watching Hannah twirl and leap across the screen. We cried, but we also laughed, remembering her pre-performance jitters and the way she'd always insist on wearing her tutu to breakfast on recital days. "You know," Aurora said during a quiet moment, "Hannah would be so proud of what you're doing. Using your own pain to help others heal. That's real strength." I touched the screen as Hannah took her final bow, her smile radiant. "I'm learning that strength isn't about not feeling the pain," I said. "It's about letting it change you into someone who can help others through theirs." As I drove home that night, I thought about how far I'd come from those dark days in the hospital. The pain hadn't lessened exactly, but it had transformed, like a heavy stone being slowly carved into something meaningful. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was finding a way to honor Hannah's memory by helping others dance through their own storms. Little did I know that life was about to throw me another unexpected turn, one that would test everything I'd learned about healing and forgiveness in ways I never could have imagined. Spring came early that year, bringing with it an unexpected sense of renewal. I'd been leading my own grief support group for 2 months now, alongside my work at the rehabilitation center. My apartment, I'd finally moved out of Aurora's house, was small but filled with carefully chosen reminders of Hannah. Her artwork framed on the walls, her ballet shoes hanging by the window, catching the morning light. That Saturday morning, I decided to take my coffee to the park near my apartment. It was Hannah's favorite season, when the cherry blossoms would paint the world in soft pink. I found myself doing this more often, seeking out places and moments that connected me to her memory without drowning in sorrow. I was lost in thought, watching a young girl on the swings who couldn't have been much older than Hannah, when a familiar voice caught me completely off guard. Grace? Grace Mitchell? I turned to find David Carter standing there, looking almost exactly as he had in college, though his dark hair was now flecked with gray at the temples. My first love, the boy I'd dated for 3 years before life took us in different directions. David, I managed, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. It's been, 20 years? He smiled, and I saw a flash of the boy I'd known. 17? But who's counting? His expression softened. I heard about your loss, Grace. I'm so sorry. The genuine compassion in his voice brought unexpected tears to my eyes. I'd gotten better at handling condolences, but something about hearing it from someone who knew me before Oliver, before motherhood, before loss, hit differently. Would you like to sit? I offered, gesturing to the empty space on the bench. As he settled beside me, I noticed he wasn't wearing a wedding ring. Over the next hour, our conversation flowed as if the years between us had compressed. David told me about his life. He'd become an architect, married young like I had. But his marriage had ended 2 years ago when he discovered his wife's long-term affair with his business partner. The worst part wasn't even the betrayal, he said, absently turning his coffee cup in his hands. It was realizing that while I was working late nights to build our dream house, they were building their own reality behind my back. I found myself sharing, too, about Hannah's illness, Oliver's abandonment, my journey through grief and healing. David listened with the same quiet intensity I remembered from our college days, when he'd helped me work through difficult decisions about my future. You always were the strongest person I knew, he said softly, even back then. I shook my head. I don't feel strong. I'm just learning to carry it all differently. Our conversation was interrupted by a text from Aurora, reminding me about our lunch plans. As I stood to leave, David hesitated. Grace, I know this might be too soon, but would you like to get coffee sometime? Just to talk more? My heart did an unexpected flip. I don't know, David. I'm still processing a lot. He smiled warmly. No pressure. Here's my card. I'm actually working on a project just a few blocks from here. The offer stands whenever you're ready, even if it's just as friends. That evening, as I prepared for my support group meeting, I found myself thinking about David, the way he'd listened, really listened, without trying to fix anything. It was so different from Oliver's constant dismissal of my feelings, his insistence that I was too emotional about everything. During the group session, one of our newer members, Rebecca, shared her struggle with feeling guilty about being attracted to someone new 2 years after losing her husband to cancer. It feels like I'm betraying him, she confessed, twisting her wedding ring. Like I'm not grieving properly if I can feel this way. As I listened to the group offer their perspectives, I found myself sharing something I hadn't planned to. Someone wise once told me that grief doesn't have a rule book, I said. We're all just trying to find our way back to life, and that path looks different for everyone. Later that night, I sat on my balcony, looking at David's business card in the soft evening light. Memories of our college days flooded back. Study sessions that turned into deep conversations about life. His unwavering support when I decided to switch my major to physical therapy. The bittersweet but mutual decision to end things when he got accepted to a graduate program across the country. My phone buzzed with a text from Sophie's mom, sharing a video of Sophie taking her first unassisted steps in therapy. Watching her wobbling but determined progress, I thought about my own journey of healing. Maybe part of moving forward was being open to unexpected turns in the path. With slightly trembling fingers, I saved David's number in my phone. I wasn't ready to call yet, but for the first time since losing Hannah, I felt a tiny flutter of possibility. That night, I dreamed of Hannah. We were in the park, and she was dancing among the cherry blossoms. "It's okay to be happy again, Mommy," she said, her smile radiant. "I just want you to dance too." I woke with tears on my cheeks, but they weren't entirely sad tears. As I got ready for work, I caught myself humming one of Hannah's recital songs. The melody didn't break me like it once would have. Instead, it felt like a gentle reminder that while some songs end too soon, new ones can begin when we least expect them. What I didn't know then was that this unexpected reunion with David would lead to complications I never could have anticipated, forcing me to confront parts of my past I thought I'd left behind forever. It took me 2 weeks to text David. 2 weeks of carrying his business card in my wallet, taking it out at odd moments to run my fingers over the embossed letters. When I finally sent a simple message, "Coffee sounds nice. Grace," his response came within minutes. We met at a quiet cafe near the rehabilitation center. I'd just finished an emotional session with Sophie, who'd finally managed to walk the entire length of the parallel bars. The triumph in her eyes reminded me so much of Hannah's determination that I needed a moment to compose myself before entering the cafe. David was already there, at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee. "I remembered your order," he said with a slight smile. "Double shot latte with cinnamon." "You remember that after 17 years? He shrugged. "Some things stick with you." That first coffee turned into weekly meetings. David would bring sketches of his current projects, and I found myself sharing stories about my patient's progress. He listened with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions about my work in grief counseling. There was something healing about being with someone who knew me before loss had reshaped my life, yet fully accepted who I'd become. One evening, as we walked through the park after coffee, David stopped by the cherry trees. "Grace, I need to tell you something," he said, his voice serious. "I've been offered a major project in Chicago. 6 months of work, starting next month." My heart sank, though I tried to hide it. That's wonderful, David. A great opportunity. I'm thinking of turning it down." "What? Why would you do that?" He turned to face me, his expression intense. "Because for the first time since my divorce, I feel like I'm exactly where I need to be." The weight of his words hung between us. Part of me wanted to run. It felt too soon, too complicated. But another part, a part that was growing stronger each day, wanted to stay right there under the cherry blossoms with him. "David, My phone rang, cutting off whatever I was about to say. Aurora's name flashed on the screen. "Sorry, it's my sister. I should take this." Aurora's voice was tight with tension. "Grace, you need to know something." I ran into Daisy at the grocery store. Daisy, Oliver's cousin, the one who'd been in those party photos the night Hannah died. My stomach clenched. "She was drunk, Grace. She started talking about that night at the casino, about Oliver." Aurora paused. "There's more to what happened than we knew." I listened as Aurora relayed what Daisy had revealed, about how Oliver had been planning to leave even before Hannah got sick, how he'd been embezzling money from his family's business to cover gambling debts, how he'd used his mother's birthday as an excuse to access the casino's high roller rooms one last time before everything fell apart. My hands were shaking when I hung up. David had been watching me with concern, and without a word, he led me to a nearby bench. "Talk to me," he said softly. The whole story poured out. Not just what Aurora had told me, but everything. The years of Oliver's subtle emotional manipulation, the way he'd make me question my own feelings, his gradual withdrawal from our family life, how even before Hannah's illness he'd been distant, disappearing for hours with vague excuses. "I keep thinking," I said, wiping angry tears. "If I'd seen the signs earlier, maybe I could have protected Hannah from—" "Stop," David said firmly. "You can't do that to yourself. Oliver's choices were his own. You were a wonderful mother to Hannah. How can you know that? You never met her." Because I see how you honor her memory every day. In your work, in the way you help others heal. He hesitated, then added, Grace, there's something else you should know. I didn't just happen to be in the park that day we met again. I looked at him, confused. I'd seen you there before, several times, watching the children play. I recognized you immediately, but I could see you were deep in grief. I wanted to approach you, but it didn't feel right. So I waited, coming to the park every Saturday, hoping to see when you might be ready for a conversation. The revelation stunned me. You waited? Some people are worth waiting for. He took my hand gently. I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give. I just want you to know that I'm here, however you need me to be. In that moment, looking at our joined hands, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't the passionate rush of young love we'd shared in college, nor the desperate need for security I'd felt with Oliver. This was something different, quieter, deeper, built on understanding and shared experiences of loss and renewal. But as I sat there, processing everything I'd learned about Oliver, a nagging worry grew in my mind. If he'd been desperate enough to embezzle money, if he'd been planning to leave even before Hannah's illness, what else might he have done? What other secrets were still buried? The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the park, when I made a decision. David, before we explore whatever this is between us, there are things from my past I need to resolve, questions I need answered. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. I'll help you, if you want. Whatever you need. Bye. As we walked back to my car, I felt both lighter and heavier. Lighter for having shared my burdens. Heavier with the knowledge that confronting the past might uncover truths I wasn't prepared to face. What I didn't realize was that my search for answers would lead me down a path that would test not only my healing progress, but also this fragile new beginning with David. The manila envelope sat on my coffee table for 3 days before I found the courage to open it. After learning about Oliver's embezzlement from Aurora, I'd hired a private investigator, something I never thought I'd do. David had offered to help with the cost, but this was something I needed to do on my own. The contents of the envelope painted a picture that made my stomach churn. Bank statements, casino receipts, emails, and photographs documented a pattern of deception that went back further than I'd imagined. Oliver hadn't just been gambling away his family's money. He'd been living a double life for years. I can't believe I was so blind, I told Maria during our weekly lunch. We'd started this tradition months ago, finding strength in sharing our healing journeys. You weren't blind, Grace, she said firmly. You were trusting. There's a difference. But the revelations kept coming. The investigator found that Oliver had taken out a secret life insurance policy on Hannah 6 months before her illness. The dates matched up with when he'd started embezzling more aggressively from his family's business. The implications made me physically ill. I called Aurora in tears. What if he knew something was wrong with Hannah before she got sick? What if he saw signs and didn't tell me? Don't go there, Aurora warned. You'll drive yourself crazy with what-ifs. Focus on what you know for certain. What I knew for certain was bad enough. Email records showed Oliver had been planning to leave us months before Hannah's illness, had already started seeing someone else. Not his cousin Daisy, as I'd initially suspected, but a casino hostess he'd met during his frequent gambling trips. The discovery threw me into a tailspin. I missed 2 days of work, something I hadn't done since returning to the rehabilitation center. My grief support group noticed my distraction during sessions. Even Sophie, during her therapy, asked if I was okay. Sometimes, I told her, trying to find words that would help us both. Being strong means admitting when we're not okay, and asking for help. That evening, I called David. He came over immediately, bringing comfort food and a steady shoulder to cry on. As I showed him the investigator's findings, his architect's mind started connecting dots I hadn't seen. Look at these dates, he said, spreading the documents across my dining table. The life insurance policy, the increased gambling, the new girlfriend. It all started around the time his family's business landed a major development contract. What are you saying? I think Oliver was planning something bigger than just running away. These aren't the actions of someone making impulsive mistakes. This looks calculated. The word sent a chill down my spine. I thought about Oliver's insistence on going to his mother's birthday party, his conveniently turned-off phone during Hannah's final hours. Had he known? Had he deliberately? I can't think about this right now, I said, pushing away from the table. I have a new life. I'm healing. I'm helping others heal. I can't let him destroy that too. David gathered me into his arms, and I let myself be held. You're right, he said softly. You've built something beautiful from unimaginable pain. But Grace, if there's more to what happened to Hannah, don't you need to know? I pulled back, looking up at him. Why didn't you take the Chicago project, David? Really? His eyes softened. Because 17 years ago, I made the mistake of letting career ambitions take me away from the person I loved. When I saw you in the park that day, I promised myself I wouldn't make the same mistake twice. The honesty in his voice touched something deep inside me. Here was a man who had faced his own past mistakes, who understood regret and redemption. Standing in my kitchen, surrounded by evidence of my ex-husband's betrayals, I made a decision. I need to know the truth, I said. Not for revenge, but for Hannah. And for myself. Will you help me? Every step of the way, he promised. That night, after David left, I sat in Hannah's room. Yes, I'd kept one corner of my new apartment as her space, with her books and toys carefully arranged. I touched her ballet shoes, remembering how she'd practiced until her feet were sore, never giving up. I won't give up either, sweetheart, I whispered. Whatever the truth is, I'll face it. For both of us. I pulled out my phone and made a call I'd been avoiding. Daisy, this is Grace. I think it's time we talked. What Daisy would reveal would shake the foundations of everything I thought I knew about the night Hannah died, leading me down a path that would require every ounce of strength I'd built during my healing journey. But this time, I wasn't facing it alone. Daisy agreed to meet me at a small diner on the outskirts of town. David offered to come with me, but this was something I needed to do alone. When I arrived, she was already there, fidgeting with a coffee cup, looking nothing like the confident woman from those party photos. I've been wanting to tell you everything for months, she said as I sat down. Her hands trembled as she pulled out her phone. I have proof. Texts, recordings. I kept them because I couldn't live with myself if I didn't do something eventually. What Daisy revealed over the next 2 hours made my blood run cold. Oliver hadn't just been gambling and having an affair. He'd been involved in a complex fraud scheme with his family's business. The casino visits were covers for meetings with shady investors. But that wasn't the worst part. Hannah's illness, Daisy said, her voice barely a whisper. It wasn't sudden. Oliver knew she was showing symptoms months before. The school nurse had called him multiple times about her headaches and dizzy spells. He kept it from you because he was afraid a sick child would interfere with his plans to leave. My coffee cup clattered against the saucer. He knew? All that time he knew she was sick? Daisy nodded, tears in her eyes. The life insurance policy, it wasn't just about money. It was about timing. He needed everything to look like a tragic accident. The birthday party was just an alibi. He never planned to come back to the hospital. The world tilted on its axis. All those times Hannah had complained of headaches, and Oliver had dismissed them as attention-seeking. All those school activities he'd skipped, claiming work emergencies. He hadn't just abandoned us in our time of need. He'd actively hidden Hannah's declining health to serve his own purposes. There's more, Daisy continued, sliding her phone across the table. These are recordings of conversations between Oliver and his girlfriend, Vanessa, the casino hostess. They were planning to use Hannah's death as cover for the missing money. Everyone would be too focused on the grieving father to notice the embezzlement. I listened to snippets of the recordings, my hand pressed against my mouth. Oliver's voice, casual and calculating, discussing our daughter's illness like it was just another business opportunity. Once the kid's gone, he said in one recording, Grace will be too broken to ask questions. We'll have a clean slate. Why are you showing me this now? I asked Daisy, my voice raw. She wiped her eyes. Because Oliver's planning to come back. The scheme fell apart. His family discovered the embezzlement. Vanessa left him for someone else. And now he's been talking about making things right with you. He doesn't know I kept evidence of everything. I left the diner in a daze, barely remembering the drive to Aurora's house. My sister took one look at my face and pulled me inside. As I recounted everything Daisy had told me, Aurora's expression shifted from shock to fury. "We need to go to the police," she said firmly. "And tell them what? That my ex-husband indirectly contributed to our daughter's death by hiding her symptoms. That he planned to use her death as cover for his crimes? It's horrible. But is it illegal? The embezzlement is. The fraud is. And if he knew she was sick and deliberately withheld medical care..." I spent that night on Aurora's couch, my mind racing. Around midnight, I called David. He listened quietly as I told him everything, then said something that cut through my chaos. "Grace, all these months you've been helping others heal from their losses. Maybe it's time to help yourself by bringing the truth to light." The next morning, I went to work as usual. I had a session with Sophie, who was now walking with just a cane. As I watched her determined progress, I thought about Hannah, about all the signs we'd missed, about the betrayal that went deeper than I'd ever imagined. During my lunch break, I made 2 calls. The first was to a detective in the Financial Crimes Unit. The second was to Oliver's family's company, specifically to his brother Elijah, who I knew had always been suspicious of Oliver's activities. That evening, as I sat in my support group circle, I shared something I'd never admitted before. "Sometimes," I said, "healing isn't just about accepting loss. Sometimes it's about facing painful truths and choosing to act on them, no matter how difficult that might be." Later, at home, I found an old photo album I hadn't opened since Hannah's death. There was a picture of her at her last school picnic, squinting slightly in the sunlight, rubbing her temple in what I now recognized as pain. Oliver stood behind her, his smile not quite reaching his eyes, already mentally checked out of our lives. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Grace, it's Oliver. I'm back in town. We need to talk. I want to make things right." I stared at the message for a long time, thinking about Daisy's revelations, about the evidence she'd provided, about all the pieces that had finally fallen into place. Then I typed my response. "Yes, we do need to talk. There's something you need to know." What Oliver didn't realize was that our upcoming conversation wouldn't go anything like he planned. The truth has a way of demanding to be heard, and I was finally ready to speak it. Not just for myself, but for Hannah, and for every parent who'd ever been betrayed by someone they trusted to protect their child. I chose to meet Oliver at a coffee shop near the police station, a detail he wouldn't appreciate until later. David and Aurora were positioned at different tables, far enough away to give us privacy but close enough to intervene if needed. Detective Russell and his partner were also nearby, waiting for my signal. When Oliver walked in, I barely recognized him. The confident swagger was gone, replaced by a haunted look. His expensive suits had been replaced by wrinkled khakis and an untucked shirt. He'd lost weight, and his eyes had the glassy sheen I remembered from his worst gambling days. "Grace," he said, sliding into the seat across from me. You look good." "Amazing what healing can do," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "Though I suppose you wouldn't know anything about that." He flinched, but pressed on. "I know I hurt you. I know I can never make up for not being there when Hannah..." His voice cracked. "I've been in therapy. I'm getting help for the gambling. I just want a chance to explain." "Explain what, Oliver? How you knew our daughter was sick months before she collapsed? How you hid the school nurse's calls? Or should we talk about the life insurance policy you took out right before her symptoms got worse?" The color drained from his face. "How did you..." "Daisy kept records," I said, watching him pale further. "She kept everything. The recordings of your conversations with Vanessa, the emails about the embezzlement, the texts about using our daughter's death as cover for your schemes." "Grace, please." He reached for my hand, but I pulled back. It wasn't like that. I was in a dark place. The gambling, the debt. I couldn't think straight. You were thinking straight enough to plan everything out, to calculate exactly how my grief would keep me from asking questions, to decide our daughter's life was worth sacrificing for your fresh start. His eyes darted toward the door. "I never wanted Hannah to die. You have to believe that. The doctors said even if we'd caught it earlier, we'll never know, will we? I cut him off. Because you made that choice for her, for all of us. I can't go to jail, he whispered, desperation creeping into his voice. My family, they don't know the full extent. They know everything now. I spoke with Elijah yesterday. Oliver's face contorted. You had no right. I had every right. My voice rose slightly, drawing glances from nearby tables. I took a deep breath, centering myself. You know what the worst part is? I've spent months helping people heal from loss, teaching them that grief doesn't have to destroy you. I've watched parents find strength they never knew they had. And all this time, I was carrying the weight of your betrayal without even knowing its full scope. Please, he begged, we can work something out. I'll do anything. I have some money saved. Is that what you think this is about? Money? I pulled out my phone and pressed play on one of Daisy's recordings. Oliver's voice filled the space between us. Once the kid's gone, Grace will be too broken to ask questions. He lunged for the phone, but I was already standing. That was the signal. Detective Russell approached our table, his partner close behind. Oliver Anderson? We need you to come with us. What followed was a blur of activity. Oliver's attempted escape was quickly thwarted. As the detectives led him away, I caught a final glimpse of his face. Not angry or defiant, but broken, like a man who'd finally run out of schemes. David appeared at my side, his hand steady on my shoulder. Aurora rushed over from her table, enveloping me in a fierce hug. Are you okay? They asked in unison. No, I answered honestly, but I will be. Later that evening, I visited Hannah's grave. The spring flowers I'd planted were in full bloom, creating a carpet of purple and yellow, her favorite colors. I did it, baby girl, I whispered, touching the cool stone. I found the truth. I hope wherever you are, you're proud of your mom. A warm breeze rustled the flowers, and for the first time since learning the full truth about Oliver's betrayal, I felt a profound sense of peace. Not happiness, the wound was still too fresh for that, but something like validation. Hannah's death hadn't been the simple tragedy I'd believed, but uncovering the truth, facing it head-on, had somehow made me stronger. My phone buzzed with a text from Sophie's mom. She took 10 steps without the cane today. She said she wanted to be strong like you. Tears blurred my vision as I read the message. In helping others heal, I'd found my own path to healing. Oliver's betrayal had nearly destroyed me, but it had also led me to my true purpose. As I drove home, I thought about all the twists and turns that had brought me to this moment. The grief group members who'd become family, Sophie and my other patients who taught me daily lessons in resilience, David, whose patient love had shown me that trust was still possible. What I didn't know then was that the story wasn't quite over. Oliver's arrest would set in motion a chain of events that would test my newfound strength in ways I never expected, and force me to make one final, crucial decision about the true meaning of justice and healing. The months following Oliver's arrest were a whirlwind of legal proceedings and emotional revelations. His family's company pressed charges for the embezzlement. The evidence Daisy provided proved crucial, not just the recordings, but years of documented fraud that went far deeper than anyone had suspected. I sat in the courtroom during his sentencing, not out of vengeance, but because I needed closure. Oliver looked older than his years as he stood before the judge, his designer suits replaced by department store clothing that hung loose on his frame. Your Honor, he said during his statement, finally meeting my eyes. I lost everything that mattered because I couldn't face my own demons. My daughter died while I was plotting to use her death for my own gain. There's no punishment that could match what I've done to my family. The judge sentenced him to 12 years for the financial crimes. The evidence about Hannah's hidden illness, while not technically criminal, was noted in the judgment. Mr. Anderson, the judge said, the court cannot sentence you for moral failures, but let the record show that your actions regarding your daughter's health demonstrate a callousness that this court finds deeply disturbing. Outside the courthouse, reporters wanted statements about the sensational case, the grieving mother, the fraudulent father, the tragic death of an innocent child. I declined all interviews. This wasn't about creating headlines. It was about finding peace. That evening, I had dinner with David at our favorite restaurant. I've been thinking, he said, reaching for my hand across the table. The Chicago project. My heart skipped. David, if you need to go. No, he smiled. I was going to say I recommended another architect for it. Someone who actually wants to spend 6 months in Chicago. But your career? My career is doing just fine here. In fact, he paused, pulling out his tablet. I wanted to show you something. I've been working on a design for a new pediatric rehabilitation and counseling center. Dr. Rodriguez thinks we could get funding through several foundations. He showed me the plans. A beautiful building with plenty of natural light. Spaces designed for both physical therapy and emotional healing. There was even a dance studio. The dance studio was Sophie's idea, he admitted. She said every healing place needs somewhere people can dance their feelings out. Tears welled in my eyes as I looked at the details. You included a memorial garden. For Hannah, he said softly, and for all the other children whose stories deserve to be remembered. What do you think? I took a deep breath. I think it's perfect. Life has a way of coming full circle. 1 year after Oliver's sentencing, we broke ground on the new center. Sophie, now walking independently and volunteering with younger patients, helped plant the first tree in the memorial garden. My grief support group had grown into a full program, with specialized sessions for parents, children, and families dealing with loss through betrayal. On the center's opening day, I stood at the podium, looking out at the gathered crowd. Aurora sat in the front row, beaming. David stood at the back, giving me a thumbs up. In the audience were faces I'd come to know well. Patients, support group members, medical professionals who'd become allies in healing. Someone once told me that grief doesn't have a rule book, I began. That we're all just trying to find our way back to life. And that path looks different for everyone. This center is more than just a building. It's a testament to the truth that from our deepest wounds can come our greatest purpose. After the ceremony, I visited Hannah's grave. The memorial garden at the center was beautiful, but this would always be my special place to connect with her. I placed fresh flowers and sat on the small bench David had helped me install. You'd be 12 now, I said softly. Old enough for point shoes and ballet. Old enough to roll your eyes when I try to help with math homework. I smiled through tears. I hope you know that everything I've built, everything I've become, started with you. Your life, though too short, created ripples of healing that continue to touch others. My phone buzzed. A text from Maria. Another mother from our support group had finally found the strength to leave her abusive situation. She and her children needed a safe place to stay. Before Oliver's arrest, I might have hesitated, feeling overwhelmed by others' pain. Now, I knew exactly what to do. That evening, David and I hosted a small dinner party. Sophie and her mother came, along with Aurora and her family. As we sat in my backyard watching the sunset, I looked around at these people who had become my chosen family. The conversation and laughter flowed easily, punctuated by Sophie's excited chatter about her upcoming dance recital. Later, as we cleaned up together, David wrapped his arms around me from behind. Happy? He asked. I thought about the question carefully. At peace, I answered. There's still sadness. There always will be. But it's woven into something bigger now. Something meaningful. He understood. Of course he did. That's why, when he asked me to marry him 2 months later, my yes came easily. We had a small ceremony in the memorial garden, surrounded by blooming flowers and healing hearts. My bouquet included Hannah's favorite purple roses, and Sophie served as our flower girl. Life isn't a fairy tale. Happy endings don't erase past pain. But standing here now, leading a grief counseling session in the center that rose from my deepest loss, I know something true. Healing isn't about forgetting or moving on. It's about transforming our wounds into wisdom, our pain into purpose. Hannah's photo still holds pride of place in my office. Patients often ask about her, and I tell them her story. Not just the tragedy, but how her life sparked a mission of healing that continues to grow. In her short time here, my daughter taught me about unconditional love. In losing her, I learned about unfathomable pain. But in healing from that loss, in facing the brutal truth about her father's betrayal, I discovered my own strength and purpose. Sometimes, during quiet moments, I swear I can hear the echo of her laughter in the hallways of the center. And in those moments, I know with absolute certainty that while some songs end too soon, their melody lives on in the hearts they've touched and the lives they've changed forever.